In 2011, Marley's brought its own brand of microbrewed beer to Main Street in Bloomsburg. Now they've moved to a new location out on Route 11, and they've promised to show us how the beer is made. Let's go check it out. We were met by Paul Shaw, the marketing director, who gave us a little bit of Marley's history.
It was very much just a family operation. Everyone involved was all working together as far as cooking, cleaning, hostessing, serving, and it slowly began to build its fan base and get bigger and more successful on Main Street. It was a good alternative for people in Bloomsburg to go for lunch, and to be able to have that microbrew right in town like that was unique for the area.
With the purchase of the new building, Marley's was able to build a customized space for the brewery.
This gives us the opportunity to do maybe about 2 or 3 more extra beers than we would normally have, just because of the storage space, so we can keep extra kegs and stuff like that. So on that regard too, just a few months ago, about a month ago, we had our for the first time ever 12 beers on tap.
Given that the previous brewery was in the basement, this is a huge improvement.
Being able to give tours, show people the equipment that we have, and that's anyone that's into microbrews really wants to check out the equipment and how we do things. And now we have a great space to be able to take people back and show them.
Paul handed us off to Marley's brewmaster, Mark Braunworth. In addition to the tour, he gave me a lesson in the basics of brewing beer. There are several house beers that are guaranteed to be on tap at Marley's no matter the season.
We tend to run 4. We have a 5th now just because of popularity. But I was always taught to have a light beer, a malty beer, a hoppy beer, and a dark beer. That kind of covers the gamut of flavors for any beer drinkers that are out there. Because the process for all the beers very much starts out very much the same. The recipe development is really where we get to have a little bit more fun, and then some of the process changes from beer to beer. But for the most part, making beer is making beer. You're not going to do anything crazy in one process that you wouldn't do in another beer.
Specialty beers come and go with the season and keep things interesting for the brewer and customers alike.
We can't go a year without making an Oktoberfest. We can't go a year without making a pumpkin beer. We can't go a year without making a wheat beer. There's certain beers that people expect during certain times of the year. And even though we're not going to stray into more traditional methods where it was very much based on the climate outside, we try and still stick to a lot of those. Pumpkin beers started coming out in July, I think, this year. We still waited till October to release ours. But yeah, we've done, in terms of specialties, I think we've done about 50 different beers in the 2.5 years we've been open.
Beer begins as milled barley and water.
This is what we call a brew house. So every beer basically goes through this process. It's actually 3 vessels, even though it's only 2. This first one, the taller one to the right, is what we call a combi tank or combination tank. So where that tube is to the bottom is what we call a hot liquor tank. It's basically just a big water heater. We use our processed water. The temperature is much higher than what a conventional water heater can handle. Ours usually sits at about 189 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the top vessel is what we call a mash lauter tun. So basically that first process when we mix the barley with the hot water gets done in that vessel. The temperature of the water is going to determine how dry the beer is going to be or how sweet the beer is going to be. The cooler the water temperature, the more fermentable sugar we're going to create. So the more sugar that's going to get digested into alcohol. The higher the water temperature, the more unfermentable sugars we're going to create. So the more residual sweetness will be left in the beer at the end. That water in the barley is called mash, like you said, and it creates a liquid that we call wort, W-O-R-T. It's through an enzymatic reaction that breaks down the complex starches in the barley into a simpler sugar called maltose. And then what we do at that point, after we have that initial wort, it's so concentrated it's really not going to absorb any more of that maltose out of the barley. So we start to transfer it into our kettle, which is basically just a big boiling pot. But while we're doing that, we actually put more hot water on top to make sure that we're extracting as much of that maltose as possible. Within this first 20 minutes of brewing, we basically dictate almost every aspect of the beer, except for hop bitterness. We're gonna dictate how much overall sugar we're gonna convert into alcohol, how much potential sugar convert into alcohol based on the amount of barley that we use. We're going to determine color by the different types of barley that we use, and we're also going to determine that malt flavor based again on the different types of barley that we use. So a lot of it's done in that first 20 minutes in terms of everything else down the line. It's in the mash tun just sitting there for 60 minutes. Then we do a recirc where we actually pull the liquid off the bottom and put it back on top for 20 minutes. And then the actual fill time from draining the wort out of the mash tun into the kettle, usually between, average is probably about 90 minutes. The kettle is where we boil it for purification. We also do reduction, so we're going to evaporate some of that water off as well. And then we're going to add our hops. We tend to do anywhere from 2 to 4 additions within the boil. The earlier we add the hops, the more bitterness we're going to get from them. The longer the lupulin oils have time to activate with the hot water and the boiling action to create more bitterness. The later we add them, the more flavor and aroma we'll get from them. We boil for 90 minutes.
That's it?
Yeah. Really? Some guys go shorter even. A lot of home brewers do anywhere between 45 and 60 minutes. Some beers we actually go a little bit longer, so we'll go like 120 minutes, 2 hours. But for the most part, 90 minutes gives us the right amount of time for hop utilization, for purification, and concentration, so we get the gravity that we need to.
I looked around the brewery for bags or barrels of hops, but I didn't see any, and for good reason.
We don't get the whole leaf. 1 is storage, 2 is accessibility of it, 3 is just processing. Wise, it's a lot easier to get a processed form of hops called pellets. What they do is they basically shred up the hops, flash them with nitrogen, and then squeeze them, pelletize them. So an 11-pound box of pellets is only this big. 11-pound box of whole leaf is a lot larger. It almost looks like 44 pounds of pellets. So for that reason, it's a little bit easier. The other is, like I said, with the process, these break up pretty easily, so it allows us to get it out of the wort. At the end when we're cleaning up and everything, get it out of our system so we can clean a lot easier.
Once boiling is complete, the wort is transferred to fermenters, but first, it is cooled by passing the liquid through 2 separate heat exchangers.
The goal that we always have is whatever our fermentation temperature want it to be, we want to go a couple degrees below it. So most of our ales ferment at about 68 degrees. We want to push over 66, 67 degrees so that we're not cooling the wort, causing the yeast to fall out of suspension right when it's getting started. Lagers, we actually do kind of the same thing as the ales, at least for the first little bit until fermentation starts, just to make sure that yeast is really active and doing its job, and then we'll drop it down to 50 degrees after that. But yeah, it needs warmth to activate and start primary fermentation. But once that's going, then we can regulate our temperature however we need to. These are what we call conical fermenters. They are closed, so they're not open at all. And then conical, obviously, because they have a cone on the bottom. This is where we basically take that initial liquid called wort, which is basically flavored colored sugar water with bitterness from hops. And we add our yeast, and then we basically fill the tank up with that wort, and the yeast digests the sugar in the liquid into alcohol, which we're keeping, CO2, which we blow off into sanitary buckets, and heat, which we actually control. There's a coil that wraps around the entire, in between the 2 walls of the tank, which has a food-grade antifreeze that basically flows through it that allows us to cool the temperature down whenever we need it to.
How long it sits in here is dependent on the kind of beer you're making, right? And
Yeah.
the temperature that you keep it at.
Yeah, there's multiple factors. One, like you said, the type of beer that we're doing. So if it's going to be a higher alcohol beer, it's usually going to take longer to process all that sugar into alcohol. The other is ales versus lagers. Ales ferment at a warmer temperature, so they tend to digest the sugar into alcohol at a much quicker rate. Lagers ferment at a much colder temperature, so that processing of the sugar into alcohol is much slower. Ales tend to be 10 to 14 days on the most part, and then lagers are usually 21 days and longer.
Is that a difference in the yeast?
Yes.
It's a different yeast for ale and lager?
Yeah, basically there are 2 major yeast strains. There's ales and lagers. And then there's various types of ale strains and there's various types of lager strains. The difference is the temperature at which they can tolerate, and then also kind of where they ferment from. So an ale tends to sit on the top, while lager tends to sit on the bottom.
Each batch of beer yields about 310 gallons. While the fermenters have a larger capacity, the storage cooler size is limited.
We'd go bigger if we could, but our tanks in the final process don't allow us to.
While there are recipes and formulas in brewing beer, you can't leave out the skill and talent of the brewer.
Your tongue is the most sensitive instrument you have. You can tell just by texture and taste if there's something wrong. You know, all of your senses really help you in brewing. You know, we can science it up and you know, worry about hydrometers, refractometers, cell counts, dimethylene blue tests. But in the grand scheme, you're your best measurement on whether you know something's right or wrong. So,
That's why he has the best job ever.
we call it quality control when we drink beer.
Yeah.
It was definitely time for me to do some quality control of my own. I brought along Caitlin Latshaw, CCN production assistant and beer aficionado, to discuss the finer points of Marley's selections. Over in the restaurant, I asked Paul to throw me a bone, which is the Marley's way of ordering a sampler.
We have samplers, bone-shaped samplers, and they can do anywhere from 4, 6, or 10. And give a shot a little small glass of every one of them, and get a good mix of what they like, what they don't like, and learn the descriptions, learn what they're drinking, understand what we have to offer.
Paul brought our bone and a map of the 6 beers we would be sampling, including 2 porters.
We have a nitro style beer, which is non-carbonated, very nice head on it, and creamier head on it. And we could put any one of our beers on that basically.
Oh,
and
really?
It kind of, the peanut butter on that's like really good. So
So you just do it like, now is that, can you only have one at a time?
for the nitro, yeah. It's just we only have one tap built for that.
Right.
Because it's a whole other tap system and everything. But yeah, but that's all you really need too. We don't need to go crazy with a bunch of nitro beers or anything. So.
That makes it interesting. It's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that you can put kind of any beer you want on it.
For the most part, yeah.
Known that. Just
I mean,
really
usually
think
you
about
want
it.
a darker beer on it. with
Right,
maltier
'cause you want
flavors,
that, like,
'cause
nice-
It softens it up. If you put a hoppy beer on nitro, it'll,
Well, that would be weird.
it kinda
Some people
kills
we do the
bitterness.
IPA sometimes, and some people like it more.
So it was time to dive in, but not without some discussion of the order in which we should sample. Do you recommend you drink them in any? Because I know, like with
Any certain order.
Yeah, I was gonna say, 'cause
Like
with
start
wine
malty,
you
go to
start
hoppy.
like
Yeah.
with wine you start dry and work your way to sweet. But what's the order of operations with beer?
It's really whatever. I mean, we always just say however how you want to start. How your flavor palette.
Usually I like to go in order when I'm
She's
trying
such a
to
professional.
sample.
I know. Look at her. She's like,
I sample beer quite often.
Yeah.
Usually I go from maltier to hoppier, just because if you can't, once you go hoppy, you can't go back. Let's start with the nitro porter.
start with a nitro porter. All right.
That's got no one is afraid of germs here.
I'm not afraid of germs. More or less, I don't know. I know where you've been.
More or less.
More or less. Within reason.
And this is the mocha.
Mocha porter. So he uses basically just a chocolate syrup, and sometimes a little cocoa added in as well.
Ooh, that's really good. And I don't usually like porters.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
Nitro beers are non-carbonated. It allows for a creamier head.
the head
Just
on
like a Guinness, you'll see it cascade as it's being poured. There's a whole science behind even just pouring it. But there's a lot of great things you could do with a nitro beer. Something like the Mocha Porter is great for bringing out the flavors that are in there. You could mix the peanut butter in there and do like a black and tan and stuff like that, which is really popular here as well.
This is the other porter.
Yeah.
The guard dog porter.
Yeah, and that's going to have more of your coffee taste.
Right.
And
I mean, I know it's not
Look at her. You're
coffee,
already
it's
disappointed.
chocolate
You're like,
malt.
if that's the one he has on. We've done an espresso porter.
Oh, yeah?
We use from a local coffee shop called the Fog and Flame. We take some of their espresso, put it in, and it's amazing.
those are really good though. Props to Mark. Those are delicious. Are we moving? Gotta go to red or peanut butter?
I was thinking peanut butter,
All right.
just because remembering how that tastes.
It smells
It
peanutty.
smells it does smell like a jar of peanut butter.
Yeah.
But, and a little, like a hint of chocolatey, but
A lot of
when you taste it, it's not.
exactly. Peanut butter
definitely smells like
beers,
peanut butter.
a lot of, peanut butter beers aren't anything new per se, but a lot of people use darker beers as a base for them. We tend to go just a little bit lighter of a style
That
beer.
is just surprisingly good.
Yeah. That's what you usually hear.
And like I said, I don't like flavored stuff, but
Yeah.
that doesn't taste like it was flavored. Do you know what I mean?
Right. I do get a lot more of the peanut butter taste now.
Than you did the last time you had one?
Right, than I did last time I had one. But I could definitely see how people pair this with mocha porter because that would just taste like
exquisite.
a Reese's peanut butter cup
Basically,
almost.
yeah. So,
Yeah, that's good. That is good.
That is really good. Yes, you should
You still
definitely
do
come
get
and
the
try it.
peanut. Yeah, you still do get the peanut butter taste without it being
But it's not
overwhelming.
horrifying. You're not
Yeah.
like,
it's actually like almost what's called the exhale. As you drink it, swallow it, and take a breath, then that's where you start to feel just a little bit of that taste to it.
when a Marley's employee suggested making peanut butter beer, Mark had his misgivings.
You kind of thought it was going to be, awful at the time, and it turned out it's just fantastic.
Well, yeah,
So,
because it sounds, in theory, it sounds horrifying.
Right.
Last summer, the peanut butter ale won a bronze medal in the specialty ale category at the Great American Beer Festival in Colorado.
Mark was out there for a few days. It's quite an event. Thousands of people, hundreds of breweries. He actually shipped all the beer down almost a month before the actual event, and that's when they do all the judging and try everything. And as he was up there, he was just going to events, learning more about things, getting inspiration from a lot of different. He came back with all these different new ideas and stuff like that. And then, of course, he came back with a medal too, which was huge for not only him but for the restaurant. A small brewery in Northeast PA to be able to win on a national level like that is huge for us.
The peanut butter has become an unofficial house beer.
As popular as it is, he's constantly working on it. He constantly has to brew it, and I think it's the bane of his existence right now. But it's become kind of what we're known for here.
Back to our sampling. Now red.
And the red is, for us in Pennsylvania, lager is so important. This is, very, very comparable to a lager. Anyone that likes a lager should like our red just fine, or Killian's, anything like that in comparison.
Yeah, Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, the only place you can order a lager and everyone knows what you mean.
It's not polluted with hops, so to speak. And I like hops. I love hoppy beers, but it's that is a solid lager.
Yeah, it is. It's very good. And you really like hoppy beers, though.
I really like
And I really
IPA all the way, but
I mean, I'm okay
that's,
with them.
That's
That's
good
really
lager. You could drink that all day.
And that's what's great too is, as far as someone that loves IPAs and that's what they like, and someone like myself or anyone else that is not a huge fan of the hoppiness flavor and likes, I'm a big wheat beer fan. And it's good to have an alternative to every style. That's why we keep certain house beers on at all times, so that there's something for everybody. Kolsch, yeah. And that's for anyone that's a fan of
Super
light
light.
beers, yeah.
It smells really yeasty. It smells like a Belgian.
Reminds me of a Pilsner, almost.
Right.
Oh, that's good.
It's definitely one of
more
our,
watery.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still got some, heft to it. That's not a description, but you know what I mean.
It's one of our more popular just because of, a lot of people that aren't too familiar with craft beers and stuff like that and are looking for that alternative to what they're usually used to drinking. The Kolsch is a perfect alternative
Well,
to that.
and I haven't seen a lot of those around at a lot of microbrews like that. It seems like whatever the lighter beer is, it's not as hoppy as an IPA, but it gives you that hoppier finish,
Yeah.
and that has a really nice smooth
Right.
finish to it.
Yeah.
You don't get that kind of bitey sort of hops thing
It's
going.
it's a lot maltier.
All right, girlfriend, now you're up to your IPA.
Tired Chaser IPA. This has been a favorite of mine coming here. And it's usually always on, so.
Yeah.
Now this you're gonna get a citrusy smell, which is coming from the hops because a lot of the hops they use give off that. It's something with the acid in the hops that gives off the citrus taste. And a real floral aroma.
And it depends on when you put it in, too. So we had that lesson with Mark.
Yeah.
That is really citrusy and
Really hoppy?
florally.
Is it?
Yeah, but it's
Ooh,
delicious.
yes, it is.
I could drink that all day.
Yeah, you'll get those notes right after, as soon as you drink it.
That is full of flavor, that beer.
Yeah, it is. Holy cow. But you kind of don't mind the hops on it. You know what I mean? If you're not a huge IPA fan, if you've never had an IPA, that wouldn't be a bad one to try just
Right.
for fun because
Well,
I mean, there
that
are some
is a
IPAs that
great
you drink that
sampling
you're
of
like,
IPA.
wow. It's
And that's
almost
what some
just
people
too
like.
much.
You know, some people love that. That's why we do a
Right.
double IPA, and it's just
I mean,
slammed
it's-
with hops. So.
That's really
And
good.
it's not hoppy for the sake of being hoppy. There's other flavors in here
Exactly.
besides the
Yeah.
hops too.
Yeah.
Which is sometimes what you find. Like people are just adding hops in just to make it.
as hoppy as
as
you
bitter as
Well, because there are
possible.
those people who love that. I don't.
Right. Oh, I would drink that either way, but. But this,
hophead.
I know I am such a hophead, but it's got a great, just all around.
No, it does. It's more interesting than just the hops. While you may come to Marley's for their beer, it is also a restaurant, and balancing the needs of both is Paul's main concern.
From a marketing standpoint, it's hard to make sure that there's a fine balance between it's a restaurant and a brewery. We do an incredible amount of food business as well. The food's fantastic, but we also, it's hard to remember that we're also a brewery. And I think things like the peanut butter beer has become so popular and it's winning awards and everyone's kind of talking about it and has a buzz about it. That's driving people even more into it from out of the area.
You've probably noticed the whole dog theme at Marley's. Where did it come from?
The owner's dog, Marley, she is a bulldog beagle mix. And the logo makes it look like she's this massive dog. She's actually not. This small dog, but that is where the name comes from.
Well, that does it for this episode of In Your Neighborhood. You've seen some of my favorite things, and now you can go and like them all on Facebook. That includes Columbia County Bread and Granola, Marley's Brewery and Grille, and of course, In Your Neighborhood. I'm your host, Jennifer Wakeman. Thanks for watching.